So I think I'm on now. All right. So I had a few bandwidth issues and a few things I had to take care of before I could go on today. And I want to make a couple announcements. First off, this is the format for the AP exam. Just so you know, let's go back. I'm scrolling up very quickly to the top, but we are going to take our AP exam on Friday, May 15th. It's going to be at 12 p.m., so at noon, and it's going to be online. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to do it. I don't know what they're going to do about internet access. I mean, we're going to have to cross that bridge when we get there. And if you have issues with being able to type it at home, I know they're going to be able to. You're going to be able to send a picture of your writing, but that is still unclear how they're going to do it. But as I understand it, they'll take either writing or typing. And as soon as I know more about that, I'll get it to you. But it's going to be Friday at noon. I sent this link on Teams to everybody, and so you can look for your other test. But my guess is you'll have it there. And as we do that, the mail just arrived. And so, and I think they had trouble with the door and didn't try. So with that, let's get down to, so exam day Friday, May 15th. This might be hard for you to see, but it's going to be one modified DBQ. Oh, that August just left us a joke, and that one hurt. That one physically hurt after all we've been through, and the crap was marooned. Okay, so, okay, I like it. So back to this. The question description. And so it's one modified DBQ. It's going to be 5 documents. You have to use at least 4. 2 of them you have to show why. So remember, that's half: historical content, audience, purpose, point of view. And for those, then you have to have some increased information, some increased data on that. And this is what I'm going to do. I have to step out. So I'm going to increase the size of this and let you look at it. So hopefully you can see it in your screen now. I'm back. Was that exciting? Okay, so for 2, so we're looking at probably a 4 body paragraphs, 2 documents where you have to explain and relate to facts, and then 2 additional documents you must explain, relate to facts, and explain HAP. And the big thing is you're going to have outside information that relates directly to documents. They're going to be looking for that because they're going to operate on the idea that you're at home and you can probably look things up or have other information in front of you. So yes, you have to have factual correct data that relates to the question. Yes, you have to show how it relates to the question and give a complete essay. But the big thing is relate documents to facts, showing how it answers your thesis. And that is why we're going to do an outline packet. I am just finishing it up. But the big thing is you only have 45 minutes, and that's going to go by like that. And so you're going to have to be efficient and start writing quick outline. The brainstorm list is going to be your review packet. What is your review packet? Well, I am filtering through it. I'm trying to guess the kind of things that would be on there, but I want it complete enough that will match any kind of question they might ask, because I have a feeling that they're going to ask something relatively obscure. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's like the events leading up to the Civil War. But my guess is it'll be something like, or something maybe not obscure on the big picture, but not that everybody would have covered as much, like the effects of the Industrial Revolution on the family or women, or the Articles of the Confederation. Think something like that, that maybe people haven't covered enough. And so this is the review packet, and you've seen something like this before. Let me get a little bit bigger view on that. Let's go 150. And so I've done things like this in the past where I gave kind of an outline. I like doing it like this because it makes you think about it and try to fit things in. And that process makes it easier to remember. And I really do believe you're going to have this information somewhat in your mind and then refresh it when you look at your outline, because 45 minutes, boom, it's over. And so I'm going through and I'm going to take some out, but there's obviously some more important ones. But this one's going to go all the way to 1945. And so we're going to need such things as a ratification battle for the Treaty of Versailles. I can't imagine trickle-down economics, cause of the Great Depression. I can go through and get some out. So I'm taking a few more out, but it's going to be about 8 pages. And that might seem like a lot, but it's not really all that much if you think about how much we have learned in that era. 1754 to 1945, that's a huge amount. And next, one more big thing about this. This gives us something to review. So when we go on review, and I'll have to do it on Teams or have you ask questions, I'm not sure how to do this. I don't want to keep doing the same thing, or I don't want to have to do it the same thing for each individual class. I want to do it all together. So I'll figure out a way to do it on Teams where you can ask questions or type questions in, and I can explain them on here and we have a place to look. But I would prefer that you print this out and write this in your own handwriting. There's little doubt that you'll learn it better than typing it, and because typing you just quick copy. You write it out, you're trying to think of a way to shorten it down so you don't have to write as much. And so I will cut this down a little bit more as soon as I'm done with today's talk about the growth of fascism, and I'll give this out to you. I'm going to have a few things before 1754, like Bacon's Rebellion and a salutary neglect, and we need those things. But then, and a few things after, like the Cold War and a few other things. But I will get rid of some that I think will be important for the test. So, one more thing. I see that a lot of you are already tuning your test on the Great Depression, and people are doing quite well on it. Remember, it is 3 short answer questions, and each short answer question is a short ID. And I wrote it very clearly in the directions, at least I think I did, and I've said it here many times, and I've said it in class. And so anybody who gives me just 3 sentences, you will get the appropriate grade. All right, so with that happy note, let's move to fascism. All right. There I am, right next to fascist salute. And the important thing to see about them is Mussolini called his followers the black shirts. And they were called the black shirts because they obviously wore black uniforms. Part of the reason they wore black uniforms was to counter the communists in Italy who also wore uniforms. Black was seen as not necessarily part of the Italian army, but at the same time a uniform that would make them distinct. And they got their money from the richest industrialists in Italy. This was backed by the very wealthy. Fascism is a conservative ideal, and so they're going to be backed by the wealthy elite. And I showed you this yesterday at the end of the period. Here are Americans giving what they thought was the Roman salute to glorify the Roman Republic with the Declaration, or I'm sorry, with the Pledge of Allegiance. And here they are doing the Pledge of Allegiance in the 1930s. And as I mentioned before, the Pledge of Allegiance was purely for republics. That Republican form of government was a better form of government. And it would not be a more nationalist thing with the United States until after World War I. And 1921 should fit in with your memory. Remember, that is the first Red Scare. So it fits in that the Red Scare would have this. Also, in 1951, as part of the second Red Scare, that is when they would add under God. So we the people, or when they add, not we the people, I started doing the preamble to the Constitution. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, 1921, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, 1951. And that should fit in right with, at the same time they added in God we trust. on coins, at least standard on coins. Some coins had it, but it wasn't standardized. And that too was a Cold War second Red Scare thing. And so part of our history, you got to figure out, you have to remember that this was not always part of the Pledge of Allegiance or something that's always been in America. This was very much affected by the political events at the time, just like this ended in World War II with hand over the heart, because we didn't want to be associated with this Roman salute that was ironically invented in the United States. So let's get to fascist ideology. And a couple things about fascist ideology. It all revolves around this idea that Italy was weak, and that's why they were humiliated after World War I and during World War I. And so very much an idea of strength. And this is a very manly thing. Manly, men. It is a masculine ideology. And I can't emphasize that enough. Strength. Oh, we're tough. Men do this. And that fits in very much with, it is a social Darwinistic idea that certain people are on top naturally and they should lead. Government should be focused to them, and they have no reason to help those below them because they're supposed to be below. And that fits in with this masculine strength. Men are supposed to be on top. Women are inferior according to social Darwinism and therefore fascist ideology. And this is a more conservative ideology. And remember what I told you before, and this is way back when we were in this thing called a classroom. Socialist ideology, or I'm sorry, social Darwinistic ideology is, well, you can tell someone, the more conservative they are, the more they believe in social Darwinism. And all of us have elements of, we believe in certain bits of this, but the more conservative you are, the more you believe that certain people are more naturally on top, there's a natural hierarchy. The more, let's say, liberal values, the more you believe in individual rights. Speaking of that, fascist ideology was intensely anti-liberal ideology. Now, the United States was created, the U.S., going back to the Declaration of Independence, on liberal ideology. The U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, that is by definition liberal. Liberal thought, and fascism is opposed to this. They think liberal ideals lead to weakness, and that's why Italy was humiliated in World War I, and you'll see the same ideals happen in Germany after World War I, and you'll see this in every conservative revival of this idea that we had become weak because of liberal ideals, going back to the French Revolution through today. And therefore, individual rights, that is a liberal idea, and that makes us weak. If everybody is off doing their own thing, therefore they will not be worried about the state, they will not be worried about what's best for the country, they will not be worried about that ruling elite that should have the power because they are what's best for the country, by definition of social Darwinism. So individual rights make you weak. Democracy, weak. The more you have average people, us yahoos, me and those listening to me now, this, having them choose leaders or even making laws or becoming leaders, is a weakness. Only those who should be on top, the people who know their place, should be on the bottom, and the natural leaders on top. People born of a better class, a better breed. And this should remind you of something. This idea goes back to men like Alexander Hamilton, who definitely believed this, and his desire to have a permanent, president and a king almost for the United States government. And remember, in the Constitution, they feared democracy as mob rule. Remember talking about the Whigs and that idea of king numbers, and why Andrew Jackson was such a threat, because Andrew Jackson represented average people having a voice. And that's why their propaganda against Andrew Jackson has been so effective, even though there's a lot of things to be against Andrew Jackson. But that's why they were so opposed to him. Not because of what he did on the frontier or Even as a slaveholder, it was his democracy. That makes us weak. Next, Constitution, rule of law, a weakness. If you bind the superior being, aka Benito Mussolini or other leaders, you bind them by laws. You are infringing on their ability to make the best decision for the state. The Constitution only binds the elite. The Constitution and the rule of law only applies to those who are inferior and cannot possibly rule themselves. That's the only thing for a Constitution. Therefore, for the others, or the Constitution and rule of law, that's for others. The inferior ones, that's who the laws apply for. The leaders, the law is meaningless. The law only applies to control the others. In fact, those who follow the law are suckers, and they are by definition inferior. You follow the law. If you follow the law, that makes you vulnerable to the natural elite who don't care about the law. In fact, that's by definition, according to fascist ideology, those who follow the law, by definition, are inferior. By definition. And now you might add, wait a second, what about the followers of the leader? They have to follow the law. Yeah, because the leader tells them to. That should seem like a contradiction, and yeah, it's all full of contradictions. That's the great thing about the leader. Speaking of that, they are defined, fascist, by who they oppose. Fascists are defined by this. I have to move something. So everybody enjoy this picture of anti-fascist propaganda in Italy as I move this over to here so I can see this. I was not able to see my screen. I didn't know what was going on. My assumption is I was still broadcasting. I want to see August's quote about the maroon ship even closer. Okay, so with that, back to this. So defined by their opposition. And so much of it is not who the fascists are, but who they hate. That's who they are. And a bulwark is like, think of like a dike or a dam against the evils of society. They will find your enemies and the socialists will bash them. And it is, remember, strength means bash. This is a violent, by definition, violent group. And they know they can be violent. Hey, the laws don't apply to them. So they will find the enemy of the people. And the enemy could be all sorts of people. The elites in society, whoever the elites might be. And usually this is going to be this educated elite. There'll be attacks against professors, against colleges, and against those who might rule and run things. And the answer, August asked a good question about Mussolini. Did he genuinely believe this stuff? And the answer is, was he just saying stuff to gain power and manipulate people? And the answer is yes. To both. Oh yeah, he believed he was on top. Sure, why not? But he was the definition of the opportunist. He would say whatever it took to put him on top. Actually, what he was hoping for was a cushy life and a lot of mistresses. But he would take whatever path he wanted to take. He would say anything. Anything to gain power. So yeah, he believed it. He believed the laws didn't apply, but he would change all the time. But the great thing is the leader can change because they're the leader. You see this a lot in authoritarian leaders. They will lie, change, in fact, lie all the time. We'll come back to this. The media. And the big thing about the anti-media bias is they want to portray the media as lying, as dishonest, as against them. And so then they could turn around and say, I will tell the truth. What they tell you is lie. They're all lying. Well, if everyone's lying, who knows the truth? The leader. And the political system. And another group I put down, minorities. Now this could be racial minorities, it could be ethnic, it could be religious minorities. And those people who are seen as different, maybe they're demanding crazy things like rights or equality or the right to vote. Or they're easily scapegoated into being enemies. My life would be good if not for them. And so they find the enemy. So much of their belief or their power does not come from their value system. It comes from who they oppose. I will find your enemy and I will bash them. But the biggie, the most important enemy are the communists. And this includes, communists are a form of socialists. And so anti-communist. And why communist? The Soviet Union has just been created, this huge, massive state now. So it's not just a value or a movement within their country. It is a legitimate power in the world. And so they will bash the communists. That's why the richest industrialists, the wealthiest people in the world who were worried that they might lose some of their wealth and power if it distributed to all people, that's why they backed the fascists. Their power came from the rich. Nazi Germany, where do you think they got their money? Or the National Socialists, when Hitler was beginning to become a national party by 1930, 1931. Where? The richest elite in Germany. That's where they got their power. Anti-communist. That is the reason they exist. We will stop the communist. And so, why do we have to fear these people, those others? Or because we are superior. There is an idea of the superior race. And this goes back to social Darwinism and racial ideology. Much of it, as I've talked about before, started in the United States. And it is us. And they would have all these displays of racial superiority. Here are Italian athletes in Italy. Here are them marching. This is in a kind of a mock-up of a Roman ruin. There's Mussolini right there. You can see my mouse circling him. I'll use the pointer. Circling him. And those other people are jealous of them. Remember, superior race fits right in with social Darwinism. We are superior and they hate us. But don't forget, even if Italians technically are superior race, there are people within the Italian race who are above them, aka Mussolini. And how do we control, how do we do this? How do we maintain our power and position and not let them win? The mass will. And so that's a parade in front of I'm looking at the picture right now, that's at the Royal Palace in Italy, and those are black shirts. And there's a mass procession. This is a symbol of a unified Rome, or unified Italy. And the people together are strong. Weak, we are weak. Or weak, we can be beaten. Yesterday I talked about the fascism. A bundle of sticks, strong. One stick, weak. Just like a fist. One finger, easily broken. What a weird analogy. Don't do that at home. A fist, strong. And that was the mass will. The people together. No individual thought. Because if people are going off in their own direction, aka liberal thought, off in all their own direction, they will be weak. That's what Mussolini said why Italy did so poorly in World War I, and that's why the world, the big three, ignored them so easily at Versailles. So the individual is weak. And so we must mobilize the entire population together to defeat our enemies. This should sound familiar. The terminology, the rhetoric of total war. Now remember, total war was created by a little cough. Well, it was a little scary at this time of year, aka pandemic time of year. But total war, remember that came from Ludendorff, and we'll come back to Ludendorff. We're not done with Ludendorff. So they talked about statism, not the individual, but the state. Statism means the country together. We are not a country of individuals and different values and beliefs and different votes. We are one. And if we're a state, we need that one leader to tell us which way to go. So statism. And so what he talked about over and over again is when Italy was great, we were at this golden age was the Roman Empire. And so once again, here's another, this fake Roman Colosseum. And here he would do all these processions in front of the great Roman arena, the Colosseum in Rome. And here is Mussolini right there giving a speech to the mass of people. And we will be great again. When Italy was great, that's when they were Roman. And therefore the Mediterranean was a Roman lake. RC, Mare Nostrum. RC. Mare Nostrum. And so they're going to reestablish the Roman Empire. That's what he talked about. That's when Italy knew their place. And the people respected Italy, their strength. And so this is intensely hyper-nationalistic. Italy would be great because we're Italians. And part of this will be imperialism. We will remake the empire. And so an imperialistic power, those weaker countries have our empire. And so Italy is going to start looking towards making or reestablishing the Italian empire. That's why they almost immediately start looking to Ethiopia. Ethiopia was one of the last remaining independent, in fact, last of two remaining independent African countries. And Italy tried to take them in 1894, and were humiliated. We're going to get them back. So there is Mussolini in front of the Trajan's forum. So that is basically, here's Mussolini, and that's what he's looking at from that picture we just saw. And notice they're children. Adults, you can indoctrinate adults, but it's much easier to indoctrinate children. You get them in school, teach them Italian nationalism, teach them fascism, give them nice little uniforms, reward them for wearing their uniforms, and give them good grades if they say the right nationalist things. Hey, you're going to get good grades for saying the right things in this class. Indoctrination works. So, hyper-nationalism. This is not patriotism. Patriotism is the belief in your country for what it stands for and its values. For the United States, a true patriot believes in the values of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. At least ideally. Nationalists don't care about those things. Whatever will make Italy great, or the US, or whatever nationalism might be. So, if it's going to be imperial, strength through the military. And this would appeal to World War I veterans. That's why Mussolini would always have uniforms. Looking back, it almost looks comical, him strutting around. But what a great picture with him, and you'll notice, not only does he have some black shirts, other Italian military officials right there, from a very sharp-looking Italian honor guard, but you notice right there is Rudolf Hess, Hitler's secretary and Reichsmarshal. And so you see that tie-in between Nazism and fascism. And diplomacy weak. This fits in with conservative foreign policy. We talked about this before the Treaty of Versailles. Diplomacy weak, military solutions. And military means unilateral. Italy will do it on our own, we will decide. If there's a problem with Greece, we'll invade Greece. That would be a mistake, but that's what they're going to do. If there's going to be a problem on the sea, we will threaten military action. And if they don't back down, we will act. Now, there's always going to be a problem. What if they call your bluff? But that is so we will threaten military solutions. After the Cold War, I just thought of this, that's why I hesitated. This would be known as brinksmanship. And you'll see elements of American foreign policy do this. We will threaten war unless you do what we want, all the way through today. And in fact, you saw that with President Trump and Iran, and the U.S. backed down, but didn't back down. It's very much a conservative foreign policy. So it's a conservative foreign policy. Now, cords are switching. All right, so with that, and don't forget, this fits in with masculinity, manly. I can't emphasize that enough, the manliness of it. That men want to be like Mussolini, and all women will love Mussolini. In fact, that was Mussolini's dream. He had all these mistresses and various wives, and you get into it. And so he talked about this as if we are one state, he called it the corporate state. And so Mussolini talked over and over again about the state as an entity. As an entity. Now, corporations were created, this entity, as a way to limit risk, to make it easier to make money. And corporations are going to become very dominant. In fact, they are the dominant element of American life today. Well, Mussolini wanted to make the entire state corporate, and I think you can see why business leaders like this. Individual workers aren't going to have rights. All that matters is the state profits. And Mussolini wanted to make it very clear. Those on top, even the rich industrial elite, we will all profit. And so this will be a merger of corporate and state power working together. And this, by definition, is a more conservative. This should remind you of trickle-down economics to the extreme. And they were weirdly anti-capitalist. Now you might say, wait a second, I thought corporations are capitalists. No, they're not necessarily fully capitalist. One of the reasons corporations were created, and this goes back to Belgium in 1830 and the United States, was to limit risk. Capitalism has two elements. First off, not only one group getting the capital, the machines, the money, the finance to produce goods, but also competition within a market. Well, corporations don't want the competition. They want to make money with no risk. And so they're technically anti-capitalism in the elements of competition. They don't want competition, they're pro-monopoly. And this is where you get some people will say, well, they're almost socialists then. Not at all. No. Socialism does not believe in social Darwinism. People who say that, and they'll say that about the Nazis all the time, either are trying to get a political agenda today, or they don't know anything. And either way, if anybody says that, question their motives. Because that's not the truth. They wanted the capital to be controlled by that wealthy elite, social Darwinistic, and they wanted monopolies. And they're also intensely pro-finance. Hey, whatever financial tool you want, make money, because that will focus money on top, and that's where the wealth should be, and that will make the entire corporate state, aka Italy, more powerful. And they were intensely anti-labor union. Labor union implies workers demanding rights for themselves, individual rights for workers. No, you are a cog in the machine of the corporation and the state. One of the first things Mussolini did was destroy the unions. That is why in get my years right. Okay, there's just a massive crow sitting on my bird feeder. Back to this. It caught my eye. That is why those wealthy people in the United States who wanted to have a coup and overthrow Roosevelt, their hero was Mussolini. That's why they liked him, because he broke up the unions. He destroyed them. What's the first thing Hitler would do once he was able to take power? Destroy the unions. That, by definition, is not socialist. So, all comes back, I kept hinting at it, the leader principle. Here's Mussolini blustering and bloviating and bragging. I like all the guys with their hands on their hips, all trying to look tough. But these are all basically sycophants to the leader. Whatever the leader wants. And so what we're going to have is a cult of the leader. And you can have all these pictures of Mussolini doing manly things. There he is without his shirt. There he is swimming. If you've ever seen Putin, in fact, if I was at school right now, and my guess is you would be there too, I would pull out that little finger puppet that was given to me of Putin without his shirt. It's the same thing. Manly things, doing manly stuff. And his picture would be everywhere. His poster would be everywhere. Mussolini. This is in Milan, and that is the fascist headquarters in Milan with the very creepy picture of Mussolini on the top. This was destroyed right at the end of World War II, which is unfortunate in a way because I almost want people to see this, to let people know how crazy the cult of the leader could become, but also I could see why they destroyed it. The leader can do no wrong. And this cult of the leader. And so there's Mussolini fencing. Oh, just one sec. I have to backtrack one thing. I thought I typed something in, but I didn't, so I'm going to go back just a little bit. You get to watch, once again, the creative process. But you can see right there. Make sure you get that idea that the leader can do no wrong. And one more thing. Government has to be based on loyalty to the leader. Not on competence, on loyalty. So, government, those around Mussolini, all the elected or all the people who run the various departments, or really importantly, the leaders of the army, they're not based upon their competence or their skill. They're based upon their loyalty to Mussolini. The first thing he did once he took full power about 1927 is that he wiped out all, well, not wiped out's the wrong word, but fired all government officials. He replaced them with loyal officials, officials that would only do what Mussolini wanted. He didn't want competence. He wanted 100% loyalty. In fact, competent leaders are bad for a fascist state, a totalitarian dictator, which you'll get to in a second. Competent leaders might be a threat down the road. Competent leaders might start doing things outside the realm of the leader. The leader doesn't care about what's best for the country or the people. The leader cares about what's best for the leader. Now, according to fascist ideology, what's best for the leader is best for the country. But I think you could probably imagine that people like Mussolini, who really took power in 1922 because he wanted a cushy government job and mistresses, is probably thinking more about his own personal comfort. And that gets back to August asked that question about if Mussolini believed that stuff or to gain power and manipulate people. He believed parts of it, but he wanted this cushy life. He talked a good show. He never actually did it. Now, we're going to get Adolf Hitler down the road. Adolf Hitler said the same stuff, and he also cared about mostly himself, but he believed it. And as incompetent as he was, because he believed it, that led to horrible things. So, there's Mussolini doing the manly fencing. And you notice these guys have the mask to protect their face, not Mussolini. And now it's time to show you, without a doubt, the greatest video clip ever made. This is a film. It's from the series. Remember that video I showed you called The Killing Fields, that great World War I documentary? Well, this is from the same series, and it's called Lost Peace, about the interwar era. But it has a little clip of Mussolini, and it is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. First off, it's Mussolini strutting and preening for the cameras, and then it shows how fascist ideology could bring all these people together.
Satisfied with their place in the world,
There's,
were given the same assurances by
and then
their
this.
leader, Benito Mussolini, who promised them a new Roman Empire.
You can't make this up.
Italians rejoiced in Italy's new
Truck after truck
productivity, the seeming
of nuns giving the fascist salute. We got to see that again. That is something you just can't see every day. So, that's how fascist ideology works. First off, the almost ridiculous shot of nuns giving the fascist salute, but that shows how it took over every part of the society. All together, the mass will. And it's not just one truck. We're talking, what is it, 8 trucks in just this little video clip?
Satisfied with their place.
There's in front of the Colosseum.
Were given the same assurances
Preening and posing.
to Mussolini, who promised them a new Roman Empire. Millions of Italians rejoiced in Italy's newfound pride and
And
productivity.
more nuns.
The seeming miracle of fascism.
Oh, the film clip doesn't work anymore. Just imagine we had another film clip. But this gets to the big one then. A word that he coined, but he coined from Ludendorff's idea of total war. Totalitarianism. The total state. This is the ultimate authoritarian dictatorship. And this can be done with the modern tools of technology, the modern tools of control, to control how people think and act. A good example of a totalitarian state is China today, where they record and film everything that everybody does. You are actually graded and given by how you act, and you could lose points if you don't do things according to exactly the way the state wants. So, what it means is we have one party control the state, the fascist party. And you'll see this in other attempts of totalitarianism. You'll see it in Nazi Germany. You'll see it in, for example, Iraq. Saddam Hussein tried to create one with the Ba'athist Party. And you'll also notice that this, or might realize that this also happened in the Soviet Union. The mortal enemy of the fascists were the communists, yet they too created a one-party totalitarian state. So, and this is total and complete control of the political system, economic system, the entire economy, based on a few elite controlling it, and they want to control the entire social functions. All people doing together, mass groups doing things together, not individuals. In fact, they wanted to control, at least in some ways, who you dated, married, procreation, you name it. Schools, in fact, schools are total control. And this operates under the element of total war, all together against the enemy. This total war justifies it. It says we must have one party rule because of the enemy. If we don't, the enemy will win. Who's the enemy? The communist. If we don't have one party control. And this is exactly what the Soviet Union did. If we don't have the Communist Party in control, the fascists will take control. One of the great ironic twists, the way the Soviet Union took power was fear of the fascists. And then after World War II, fear of what they saw as just another form of fascism, the United States and the West. How did Nazi Germany maintain power? Fear of the communist. The same in Italy. So the elements of total war. And what does that mean? No dissent. Any dissent against the state, against the party, against the mass will, against the leader. Any dissent against the leader will let the communist win. Do you notice all these elements of fascism come back to total war? No dissent. Any dissent means a weakness, and we must root it out. And that is why I said, when I went over total war, you have to remember the elements of total war. There are lots of things they do, but the number one thing they do is propaganda. To propagandize the leader, that's the cult of the leader, put his face everywhere, and the enemy everywhere, we must root them out. And they will reward individuals, so the state doesn't do it, reward individuals for rooting out the enemy. And so children would get rewards, a wrist or a shoulder band or a badge or a medal or a hat if they rat out their teachers or their parents for being, or their neighbors, but big ones, parents or teachers, for being enemies, or spouses informing on their wife or husband, or people at work informing on their workmates, having everybody looking out for the enemy because the enemy is everywhere and people get a big reward. And also by banning free speech, because that helps the enemy, have a secret police everywhere. And you never know who the secret police is because by definition they're secret. And so you have this idea that you're always being watched. You might go at work, you're bugged. At home, the assumption is they're listening to you. And so you always act in a way that the party wants. And anybody who complains against the secret police, saying, well, if they don't like the fact that they're potentially being spied upon, that by definition is dissent. And so you might notice the picture there, Big Brother is watching you. Well, that is from the original illustrations from George Orwell's classic book, 1984, where he talked about the monstrous totalitarian state. He was a socialist. And he was writing that socialism has been betrayed by the monstrous totalitarian state of the Soviet Union. And the idea is that you're always being watched. But the argument is that's a good thing because that will root out the enemy. So, how do you enforce this? Terror. Terror. And terror means those who do dissent, those who are the enemy, must be taken away. In Argentina and Chile, they would call it being disappeared in the 1970s with their brushes with totalitarianism. They would be disappeared. And people would be taken away. Sometimes would reappear, sometimes not appear. But the number one thing is everybody knew when they were disappeared, when they were taken away, they're going to be taken someplace and tortured and possibly horribly murdered. And the idea is the threat of torture. And so everybody knows if someone is taken away, you better not mention their name because they're going to be tortured and you don't want to be defending them or you'll be next. And not just the individual, their family, their neighbors disappeared. And the whole idea is that everybody will act like they never existed because nobody wants to be the next one taken away. And that threat of terror is how they enforce it. The always threat that someday you might be disappeared. And remember, Constitution and the rule of law does not apply to the leader and therefore the state. So there's no trials. There's no rights of the accused. The only trials will be a show trial to get them to try to give other names of potential traitors to the state. In fact, they use that a lot, that the enemy, those who dissent against the leader, are traitors. Those who dissent against the leader are those trying to bring down the state. And so that's what they would say. Remember I went back to about the media? The media are traitors. The elite are traitors. They're trying to bring the state down, using words like that. In fact, the whole thing about the torture of a totalitarian state is not to punish. Well, it's terrifying. I'll get a little bit of punish. But it's not to get the truth out of you. The torture is for the accused to give other names. We want you to name these people, and they're tortured until they name them. Torture never gives the truth. Torture gives confessions. And that's what totalitarianism wants. But the thing about Mussolini did elements of this, talked about it. They did set up places where they would keep those who were accused of traitors. I should add, what do you call those? Well, we've already talked about this. Remember the Cuban Revolution, the reconcentration strategy of General Valero back in Cuba in 1895, 1896. The reconcentration system. Reconcentration camps, concentration camps. That's what they are. That's all concentration camp meant was where you concentrate people. They called the first training facilities for U.S. soldiers when they entered World War I as concentration camps, which seems so weird now because of what's going to happen with totalitarianism. But where are we at here? So, Mussolini talked a good game, but he didn't quite do it. Germany and the Soviet Union will be different. And so we talk about fascism and lay it out there with Mussolini. And you will see elements of this, of fascism, even in our own country. Remember what I told you. When they wanted to overthrow Mussolini, or overthrow FDR, they wanted a government like Mussolini. Those are some of the richest people in the United States, the DuPont family. There were a couple, one Rockefeller was involved, but anyways, let's get to Germany. Germany after World War I. Let me do a couple things and then I'll quit there. Fascism is something that I really believe we have to know. Not just because it's an important part of history and it'll lead to so much about American history. And boy, what a great thing to put down for the DBQ, huh? You never know. But it's on the rise. Fascism is on the rise right now. There is a fascist government that has taken power and creating this totalitarian state right now in Hungary. They're banning political parties and they're taking over. Fascism is on the rise in Austria. It is on the rise in Poland. In fact, they are close to taking over Poland right now, a fascist government. It is on the rise in Serbia. Fascist parties are growing all over Europe. Most dangerously and terrifying is in Germany. Russia is not quite fascist, but they are clearly an authoritarian state, and without a doubt, Putin has fascist elements. Is it pure fascist? It's not really a fascist state, it's more of an authoritarian dictatorship that's a kleptocracy. And a kleptocracy is a government that steals from its people. Of course, you'll notice something. All kind of fascist states are governments that steal from their people. Inside Mussolini's government, they looted the Italian people. Companies got big contracts to make munitions, and they made inferior weapons and enriched themselves. They see government as a way to get rich. But I should add, remember what I told you. Fascism is like trickle-down economics to the absolute extreme. Trickle-down economics sees government as a way for the very wealthy to get rich to increase production. There is a tie-in. You can see why this would be seductive to some people. So Germany. And a couple things I want to get about Germany before I quit. In Germany, there was this dangerous myth after World War I. This myth after World War I. And I can't emphasize this enough, and I said this in class after World War I, after the armistice on November 11th, 1918. German soldiers, when they marched home, and these are German soldiers marching home after the war, and they're marching home in relative good order. It's not a mob. Yes, they aren't in their fine marching lines as you would imagine, but these are still disciplined soldiers on their way home. This does not look like an army that was defeated or devastated and crawling home wounded with their tail between their legs. And the myth was that the German army was never really defeated in World War I. That they could have kept fighting. It wasn't the French, the British, and the Americans that defeated the Germans. It was something else. And in fact, don't forget, the Germans defeated the Russians. They defeated them. So they thought, we beat the biggest country in the world. No way we lost on the Western Front. Something beat us. And this myth would grow and fester. And veterans of World War I came back to unemployment, families that seemed like strangers to them. Many were wounded. They were psychologically damaged, some beyond repair. And they were ignored, treated horribly, left to be impoverished with no aid at all, virtually, from the state. And this is the way it is after every war. Veterans come home and are basically ignored. And this is the ironic thing about fascism. Fascism will glorify the heroes in the military, the soldiers, but have little care about them as individuals. Soldiers have a job to do in a fascist state, to be heroes and die for the state. So when they talk about glorification of the military, they're not talking glorification of individual soldiers. It's something else, something more sinister. But back to this then. There would be rebellions all over Germany. And in Berlin, right after the war, there's what's called the Spartacus Rebellion. And the Spartacus Rebellion was a communist rebellion that prematurely tried to take over Berlin, and they were hoping to unify with the Soviet Union. And Rosa Luxemburg would be one of the great communist leaders of it. She was opposed to the war. And here is workers defeating militarism in Germany. She would be murdered by veterans of the war called the Free Corps. And the reason I'm mentioning this is to give you an idea how just chaotic it was in Germany. There was a communist rebellion, it failed. There was a militarist coup called the APUSH. Push means coup. And that is actually the German Kriegsmarine or Navy flag. But you notice this was the symbol of the APUSH. These were sailors and veterans who tried to overthrow the government in Berlin and create a right-wing military dictatorship and bring back the Kaiser. Maybe not him, but member of that family. And there they are from the Brandenburg Gate right in the middle of Berlin. In fact, if you look at this picture, see where my mouse is right here? Just over here is where the American embassy was and still is. It moved to Bonn when it was West Germany, then when Germany was reunified after the Cold War ended, it moved back to this old building here. This area right here was actually in the Eastern or East Berlin section. But this was defeated too. In Munich for a while, all of Bavaria became a socialist state for about 4 months. There were communist rebellions, counter-rebellions, chaos, and not just in Germany, all over Europe. It happened in Poland, and the Soviet Union was in the middle, well, Russia at that time, was in the middle of their civil war. And so in this civil war, veterans, who more than anything else followed the remnants of the old military elite and the attempts at the civilian government, these veterans would be called the Free Corps. Now, free as in they are not aligned to the German government. The Treaty of Versailles said Germany could only have an army of 100,000 men, no tanks. These could not be German soldiers. But remember that picture I showed you just a few seconds ago? It seems like so long ago. It showed German soldiers coming home from World War I. They had all their gear. So they had all this gear. They had all this gear. They still had it. So they came out as this informal militia, but they could not be aligned to the state because of the Treaty of Versailles. And there were French, British, and American troops occupying Western Germany at this time. So they knew, in reality, they could not resist the combined force of the Western Allies. So they formed these informal militias. And here they are fighting. That's in Frankfurt. That's in here's in Berlin. I'll put the mouse over where it's. That's in Berlin. That's in Berlin where they fought off first the Spartacus Rebellion and the APUSH. It was chaos in the Civil War. Now, a couple things about the Free Corps. The Free Corps, since they could not be aligned with the German army, they could not have, you can see it here, this is actually a British tank that the Germans captured in World War I and they were using in the Free Corps. You see that symbol right here? And this is from, actually this is a museum in France. But that, the German Empire Cross, sometimes it's called the Maltese Cross. That was a symbol of the German army. And so they couldn't have that cross, technically, because they didn't want to be tied to the German army. So even though they had this, they started painting other crosses, like you see the skull and crossbones. Skull and crossbone, it's a diagonal cross. Here men are wearing shoulder patches, and they have various types of very stark crosses, a lot of diagonal crosses. Because these crosses, they could have a cross like the old German army, like the Imperial Army of World War I, but not be technically part of the German army and therefore violating the Treaty of Versailles. And so all these Free Corps units in Berlin, and they scattered to other big cities like, let me throw one out here, Munich. I'm getting a phone call. Well, we're going to have to cancel it. But, hello? Hi, I'm actually talking to my class, and they're listening to this conversation right now. Can I call you back? All right, bye. So I had a doctor who kept calling me. And I had to answer the phone and say, I'll call him back. And so you got to enjoy another part of my personal life. Don't you feel like, see, even though we are only connected virtually, we are still together. By the way, you notice I'm wearing my college shirt. What's the question? Well, either these rebellions created a better situation. Who knows what the Spartacus Rebellion would have created? The APUSH would have led to a military dictatorship, so no. But we'll get to the Weimar Republic. We'll get to it in just a second. It's no. The answer is probably no. It's just unfortunate that they were so desperate to try to get a better situation. But let's get to this last thing I want to get to before and now this is kind of the last big, exciting moment. Think of all kinds of different crosses here. All these different crosses to try to say that they're not part of Germany or the German army. So let me give you another example of cross that was also in Free Corps units in Munich. And don't forget, these are veterans of World War I. So these are disillusioned soldiers, but there are millions of them. Oh, another cross. You might refer to that as a swastika. You notice it is just a cross. And so here are Free Corps members. Okay, this is a helmet from Munich. This is Munich. This is Berlin. It's another cross. It's not the German cross. It's not the same thing, but it is a cross. And so they could still have that connection with them. And a lot of them use it. They also thought it kind of looked cool. It had in Germany at that time, it had more of a connection with the Russian Orthodox Church. But it's just a cross. People today, sometimes you might hear them talk about Nazi Germany, talk about this deep inner meaning of the swastika. And yeah, the Nazis would try to make up some kind of, the swastika represented Germanic, Aryan superiority, and going back to the roots of the Aryan race. That's all garbage. The swastika was chosen by the new National Socialist Party because it appealed to veterans of World War I, and they were members of the Free Corps who had been hardened by street fighting during these communist rebellions. That is why they chose the swastika. There's not a deep meaning yet. But it's like the Confederate battle flag. It will soon have a very big meaning down the road. And the government, out of the roots of this street fighting and these informal militias, they would hammer out a republic called the Weimar Republic, where they took all of these desperate states within Germany. These were all technically individual kingdoms within the German Empire, and made them into states, Staaten, of the new Weimar Republic. And this is the roots in many ways of the modern German state. This constitution would be loosely based upon the 1848 constitution that never was fully implemented. And the German government today has many of the same elements of this German Weimar Republic. And nothing speaks republic more than groups of people on unicycles. I should add that this was a very unequal society, a very unequal republic, and to a lot of Germans this was seen as a very decadent state, and that is a wonderful place to quit with the Weimar Republic. So I covered a lot. I'm going to finish up that review packet. Now I want to take some things off, but I'm really worried about not having enough on there, on that review packet for the AP exam, that some of you won't be ready for the DBQ. With 45 minutes, that is a major concern I have for you. I want you to go in that with a chance to do well and to feel good about it. So if I make it that big, I'm going to make it worth a lot of points. It will be worth 2 times a test score. And that will be a major element of your final, will be this review packet. So if you put time in this and do this over the next month, and when you hand that into me, and I see that you put time in it, I'm not going to grade every individual note, but I'm going to go through and look and make sure that you did it correctly. I will reward you immensely for studying for this test. And if you're not taking the DBQ, since it's going to be part of your final, you still have to do it. And it'll be a good final for us. I know it'll be a lot of work, but that will be then review sessions. I will come online, we'll open it up to Teams. I don't know how we'll do it. Maybe we'll have to go on Zoom, and we will, I'll review over everything on there. But hopefully then this will make you so that you're prepared for that DBQ. We're going to do some more, we're going to do one more full DBQ, but we're going to do it more like the style of the new one. And then we'll do partial ones and to set things up. All right. If there's no questions, I just got to reply. If there's no questions, then we will, I will put that up. And please, if there's any questions, let me know. And also, any comments about the YouTube video, please put up there. I want to know things that you think about it, if I should change it, or if you're understanding it and it's working for you. If I go too fast, let me know, and I will continue to go too fast, but I'll at least think about trying to slow down. All right, on that happy note, since there's no other questions, have a good rest of your day. Hey, it's sunny, it's a beautiful day. Go outside and spend time away from other people by at least 6 feet. I will be on, I think, a little bit earlier tomorrow. Goodbye.